Well, another person who it's somewhat hypocritical is Jake Tapper himself. And there's actually a mashup out there of Jake Tapper who's running the kind of interference that he's criticizing others for running. So let's take a look at this mashup.
It makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that.
It's very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable.
You have no I can't. That's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline. President Biden embraces his stutter, talking about it, while Trump mocks it, exaggerates it, belittles it. He's sharp physically. I mean, mentally. Yeah. I think the question is physically, right?
Right.
More so?
Right.
Right. And the guy who's his chief opponent is only 3 or 4 years younger than him.
Exactly.
I mean, you have questioned President Biden's age, mental fitness, ability to lead.
Dean Phillips, by the way, the radically moderate who want to take on Biden.
Of those supporting Biden, you said, quote, "Shame on all of you pretending everything is okay. You're leading us and him into a disaster." Do you worry that you damaged him at all? I don't doubt that you got hugs and handshakes behind closed doors today, and maybe even publicly, some of them because they like you personally. But I've heard a lot of really nasty stuff about you from your Democratic colleagues. Sure. I mean, just like, what is he thinking? Exercise in narcissism. I mean, false claims to the Wall Street.
Exercise in does he not see the exercise in narcissism that was coming from the president?
One would wish.
Journal about President Biden's mental fitness and acuity. He's 81, and his memory, it doesn't seem great. It's not horrible, but I don't understand the outrage. Quote, "Behind closed doors, Biden shows signs of slipping," unquote. The Wall Street Journal is owned by News Corp, which is run by the Murdochs. Beyond the headline, there is some critical nuance here. The article is mostly based on observations of Republicans, with former Speaker Kevin McCarthy the only one going on the record. They do note in the article that most of the criticism comes from Republicans. Have you heard any concerns from anyone who has met with President Biden about him seeming a little slower?
No.
The Russians are trying to make us and the public not trust our election integrity. Joe Biden has dementia, all this stuff.
So there you have it. So Norman, you are a media analyst as well. So can you talk to us about why it was that Jake Tapper was part of this chorus of cover-up that he's now indicting?
Yeah, his attack on the Wall Street Journal is just typical of the herd mentality. Here, a media outlet actually did thorough reporting. This was before the catastrophic debate, and it was solid. And so the hay that Tapper was making out of it all was that Rupert Murdoch, a right-winger, owns the Wall Street Journal, but the craziness there is on the editorial page. And when you're an investor, you're not going to sustain or support or really, in a sense, allow the Wall Street Journal to just make stuff up on the news page because you're investing on that basis. So the reporting was very solid, as it often is in the Wall Street Journal. That was a very, very well-grounded story, an expose. Let's assume, and I think it was the motivation, we're going to cover up for Biden because we want to defeat Trump. But by covering up for Biden, it actually made it possible for Biden to file for re-election and keep running until it was too late for the party to have any contested primaries and have somebody run the gauntlet and be vetted and so forth by voters who could have run a strong campaign and quite possibly defeated Trump. And we had the experience at Roots Action. We were going to Democratic National Committee meetings with flyers. When the DNC met in Philadelphia, the full 450 of them, we hired a huge billboard truck to circle around the hotel where the DNC met. And it said, "Don't run Joe." And we explained why. But that's sort of like a heretic at the devout convention. Sam Rosenthal, our political director who was there, he was scorned, he was mocked, he was laughed at. He was told, "Hey, you're just going to help Trump this way."
Well, you point out in your review that people like AOC and Bernie, and you were a Bernie surrogate and delegate.
Well, I was a delegate twice in 2016 and 2020.
Yeah. So you point out that they actually weren't better than the centrists in pushing Biden.
They weren't. As a matter of fact, Pamela Jayapal, the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, endorsed Biden 2 years before the 2024 general election. Then the next year, It was, among others, AOC and Bernie Sanders. And then, and I think this is the worst part, down to the day that Biden withdrew from the 2024 race, AOC and Bernie Sanders were adamantly stating that he should complete the campaign for 2024 for president. And it was just astonishing to me. And I think it goes to how pervasive this go along to get along with the party hierarchy is. Again, this is an irony. In the name of, hey, we've got to hunker down and say that Biden's okay, they actually enabled him or encouraged him to just keep going and not quit until it got even worse. There were fewer and fewer days. Turned out only 107 before Kamala Harris, between her declaration of candidacy and when the votes were in.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I think that a lot of people who don't want to look back at what happened are obviously have a vested interest in not looking back, because that would require some introspection and criticism. I remember I was on some listserv and someone emailed the listserv and they said that they had some role in the Harris campaign and that they were trying to warn people about the mistake in going kind of like Cheney, like the Cheney route to try to win the elections. And they were very much like, this is not about blaming. This is about accountability and moving forward. And someone on the listserv was like, stop it. This is how they win, when we attack each other. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, how can you be so blind to this? But we see that this is happening still. And so here is actually, sorry.
I would say that kind of response is sort of like de facto saying, hey, well, let's keep making the same mistakes over and over. Why not?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so here is a write-up of this. This is by Waleed Shahid, ignored by the party, blamed for its defeat. This is an article about the way that some of Harris's people are not only not taking any responsibility, but blaming people like the uncommitted for costing them the election. So someone named Ammar Moussa, who did rapid response for Kamala, he tweeted out an article breaking the Trump administration is working on a plan to permanently relocate up to 1 million Palestinians from the Gaza Strip to Libya. 5 people with knowledge of the effort told NBC News. So obviously that's an attempt at ethnic cleansing. And so the response from Ammar Moussa was CC uncommitted movement, obviously suggesting, thanks guys, this is your fault. Hope you're happy now. And then this very same person has the gall to say, our campaign bent over backwards to accommodate them being the uncommitted movement. The VP broke with Biden on Gaza. She met them. Senior leadership met with them. And Mehdi Hasan responded. And Mehdi Hasan was someone who's very much vote Biden over Trump. And he said, sorry, Ammar, this is total BS. Your campaign refused to allow a Palestinian lawmaker offered by uncommitted to be on stage at the DNC. The vice president refused to break with Biden on Gaza. And when asked what she'd have done differently to him, she said, there's not a thing that comes to mind. Again, a lot of people I know watching this don't agree with Mehdi's politics, but I don't think anything that he said there is anything but true. So Shahid writes, there's a genre of Democratic operative who spent the last year gaslighting the public and covering up Biden's decline, who now only invokes Palestinians not to mourn with them, but to mock them. It's a cynical hackery at its worst, divisive and self-sabotaging. And so he's referring to the Ammar Moussa tweet, CC the uncommitted movement. So his response is, there's a genre of Dem operative who cares more about clout chasing than winning elections. While Lee led a campaign to persuade voters Kamala Harris would have treated Palestine the same as Trump, he knew that was a lie, but he couldn't stop because it had damaged his business. Yeah, I mean, Brian O'Donnell, another good response. The uncommitted movement made incredibly clear that they wanted to vote for Biden and Harris, but the campaign chose not to engage. You can't actively reject your voters' values and still expect them to show up. Matt Duss, who worked for Bernie. This is a blatantly dishonest description of the uncommitted movement, but it's apparently one that a number of party hacks have decided to push. It couldn't be more obvious that the clout chasing accusation is actually a confession. And then I just want to quote one more person, Barak Ravid, who is an Israeli-American journalist at Axios. Democratic mega donor Haim Saban wrote an email to Biden's aides, Steve Ricchetti and Anita Dunn, about Biden's decision to put on hold a weapons shipment to Israel. Quote, let's not forget there are more Jewish voters who care about Israel than Muslim voters who care about Hamas, which is like the most offensive framing in the first place.
It's sickening. And Haim Saban is somebody who was going nuts because Biden did this very brief hold on 2,000-pound bombs. The fact is that Kamala Harris made a decision in her presidential campaign last year. It was immoral, and it politically helped to sink her campaign. And to rewrite that now and pretend that the polling wasn't there, and it was available at the time, actually, and then just say, oh, let's blame anti-war people. Let's blame them because they didn't want to see little children blown up courtesy of US taxpayers. That's really what they're saying. And we have a right, a responsibility, and you might say the ultimate duty to say, look, history matters. It's not just in the dustbin. Unless we can call this out and change it, it's going to happen again and again.
Well, speaking of Biden and Gaza, I think it is really important for people to remember that, again, it was more important for Biden and for Kamala, who was not a powerless, agency-free victim, to respect Biden's legacy and norms, because she also didn't want to offend him by deviating from him. Like the same people who were calling Trump an existential threat and saying this election was the most important election ever, those same people thought that it was more important to not offend Biden and not damage his legacy than it was to defeat Trump. So I don't know how anyone can be blaming the voters as opposed to the actual candidates.
Yeah, I mean, if the Democratic Party so-called leadership doesn't like the voters, I don't think they get to elect some new ones. These are people in the country, and we're way more perceptive about Biden's condition. I mean, 37% in one poll, 37% was all of Democrats who wanted Biden to run for re-election before he announced that he would do it again. So the voters, 2/3 of them basically were saying, don't run Joe, lowercase, don't run Joe. And so it's really this elitist policy. We have these pundits, we have the inner circle of New York Times, Washington Post, the networks, and we have the big money people. And one little anecdote quickly is that when Bernie's forces were at high ebb in 2017, there was the Unity Reform Commission of the DNC. I went to some of those meetings, and the Clinton people the Hillary Clinton folks had like 55%, and Bernie people had 45%. And Jim Zogby, a great progressive leader, had presented at that meeting one resolution after another. We need financial transparency. We need to know how the money is being spent, who it's going to, at what rate, for what purpose. And those resolutions were voted down again and again. Jen O'Malley Dillon was the chair of that Unity Reform Commission. She ran the show. She helped torpedo all of those proposals that were common sense transparency. What happens to her? She becomes deputy chief of staff of the White House. Then she runs the Biden re-election campaign. Then she runs the Harris campaign. Well, her buddies are making out like bandits. You can't raise and spend more than $1 billion with a B in a few months and not just be lining a lot of pockets. So, of course, they would rather win than lose. But in a financial sense, they never lose.
Right.